Preparing to install the DCT clutch pack assembly. Now this assembly, when we purchased it, was the highest, or is possibly the highest rated one that we know of that's on the market for the dual clutch transmission, rated at around 1500 Newton meters of torque. Hopefully we'll definitely exceed that with no problem. And it'll push them to come out with something a lot more better, because as of now we don't know of any 5 cylinders that are pushing that kind of torque. But of course the VR6 engines definitely have the capability of pushing that. One of the things I'm happy with is this comes complete. It's already ready to drop in. It has the hat, everything. All I need to do is use my clutch alignment tool to go ahead and install it. So I came with a larger snap ring, cover plate, everything just ready to go, extra shims. So this comes complete with all the parts that I need. Drop it in and continue moving forward. Now we're getting to the tedious part of the transmission, measuring the axle play of the clutch disc. So one of the things you want to do is definitely line up all the rings. They have to be 180 degrees apart. So that center ring is rotated all the way around 180. And I have to install the disc assembly and then set up a dial caliper and measure the axle play. Check out the aggressive pattern of this clutch. So both top hats are removed. This is the racing clutch and the stock factory clutch. You can see how these are sitting down a lot further inside the groove. These are stacked a lot higher, closer towards the edge with the extra clutch disc. But these bad boys are aggressive. With some moving and shifting around, I have the clutches installed, and I had to position my clutch tool right here to make sure it was in a proper position where it's clearance between, as you can see, and it's not touching. And that way I can install the correct shim out of all of these to find out the proper one for the correct axle play. So I'll set up my dial gauge on the base and go through the tedious process of going back and forth through each one of the shims and measuring to get the proper axle play. But it's a technique that you can do where you can set up my dial gauge here and the second one here, and as I'm lifting this up to measure and come up with the proper spacer or shim that I would need for this. So I'll go through several techniques to make sure that we get this set up properly. I have a few dial indicator tools and brackets set up for degree and camshafts, but this flex one is not going to work and pivot the way I would like to get it over here for proper measurement. It'll lock it in place, but I want to get a little closer. So what I'm going to do is use one that I use on my cylinder head when I'm degreeing cams, which is this one, which has a magnetic base. So what I'm going to do is the plate that I use, I have this already set up for bolting it to a cylinder head for my 16 valve GTI. I'm going to drill a hole in this, mount this plate right over here on top of the housing. All I have to do is drill a hole through it, run a bolt through it, and then I'll have a magnetic flat base that I can clamp my tool to, and then I can adjust the height for making sure I have a proper fixture for measuring the axle play. I'm about to wrap up tonight, but I wanted to get my base stand in position to measure my axle play on these race clutch discs. I have a digital dial indicator I picked up, so that way I can get pretty much accurate readings when I go to set up. DCT provided some nice hardware to come along with the package that we purchased. They gave us an extra snap ring, all the spacers to make sure we can measure the proper axle clearance. This is the original clutch setup right here, and even the factory clutch, you can see it had pretty nice aggressive disc in here, so no wonder the factory setup with a software upgrade, these things can handle anywhere from, I would say, probably close to 750 to 900 horsepower. So the factory setup is still pretty nice. They gave us all kind of new hardware. We got the new hat, cover plate, a lot of extra stuff. So once I get this put back together, on my axle plate measured and the hats and everything, cover plates installed, then I'll go ahead and install my remaining seals, my filter, and put this bad boy back into position and jump back on the engine. Going through my available shims. So originally I had a 0.23 in there. .22. I want to tighten it up. Going through my available shims. Originally I had a 0.23 in there, and that was a little too loose. So I want to go a little tighter. I installed a 0.37, and that was too tight. So that took almost all of my slack out. So somewhere I'm bouncing around between 0.1, 1.33, and 1.27. So I'm going to try the 1.33. That did put me within spec. This one, I'm going to assume the 1.28 is going to be a little too much. That's going to stick me out of my tolerance. So we're stuck between 1.33 and, of course, when I had the 1.38 in there, it was too tight. So we're going to try this 1.33 and see what we come up with, because this did put me within my specifications. Now, I had a tolerance of 0.19, and that took me out of specification with this specific shim, and this one measures in at 1.23 millimeter. Now, I did install a 1.37 millimeter, and that took me out of my specifications. It made it actually too tight. When I installed a 1.33 shim, that laid me right in to my tolerance. I wanted to be a little bit tighter, but that did put me within specification. And I have not tried, of course, a 1.28, because that's going to be a little looser than I would like. So I'm going to probably stick with the 1.33, which did put me right into my specification of what I want, 1.33, 1.34. I decided to go with the 1.3 millimeter shim, 1.33. That turned out good. It put me within the factory specification for having a proper axle plate for the dual clutches. Right in the spec. Perfect. 2:34 in the morning, back up grinding. I'm ready to go back in here and take the cover plate back off, snap the snap ring out, go in there and change my shim from a 1.33. That's my alarm saying that make sure I'm up. Anyway, go back in here, take out the 1.33 millimeter shim and put in a 1.28. It's like 1.28, 1.27 millimeter shim. That should give me the proper clearance that I would like to achieve and not set everything up too loose. Originally, my spacer that I had in there was a 1.24. That 1.24 put me right at the jagged edge of a 0.11 millimeter tolerances. All right, the tolerances that we're looking for according to the factory specifications with these new discs are anywhere from 0.05 millimeter to 0.12 millimeter of clearance. And I was at a 0.11, like I said, and that put me a little looser than I would like. So I want to kind of bring that back a little bit within spec. If I go in there and take out that 1.33 millimeter shim and put in the 1.28, that should definitely put me in a nice range somewhere up in the middle. All right, let me snap this out real quick and then go and get ready for work. I installed a few shims and found one that I want to settle on that puts me right into the factory specification. We want to be anywhere from 0.05 millimeter to 0.12 millimeter of clearance. So within that range, we're measuring pretty good. The trick is just getting a nice lift straight across. So the clutch disc assembly does have some weight, but you want to pull up pretty even and not on an angle, just lifting straight up to get a nice accurate measurement. .07, so that puts us good right in spec. Other shims put us right at the jagged edge, which was 0.11 millimeter, and like I said, the tolerances on the upper end will be 0.12, so that was a little too close. Other shims put us a little too low in the spectrum, which was like 0.04 millimeter, and this one definitely puts us right into that range where we want to be in the safe zone. And I double check, triple check, quadruple check, checked many a times, loading and unloading this assembly. Up, down, up, down, up, down. So I got a nice bite in there. Turned out pretty good. One of my concerns is placement of the clutch retaining tool right here. If I put it in to one of the notches, I have a lot extra clearance because it allows the clutch to drop down further, and I can position my snap ring and the shims, and I have a larger selection with different shims because it's dropping it down further. But if I place it against one of the tabs, as I have it resting against now, one of these tabs right there, it raises it up a little higher. But now even that, it still gives me more room with my snap ring in position, and I can still slide the snap ring around and give me room for play. When I had it up tighter and further with the shift fork level, as you can see, it's kind of tapered off, it's beveled, it's not totally flat on the surface. When I have it up like that, and I'll just raise it up into position like that, it is so tight, it takes away the rest of my play. I have no room to even get any type of shim, and barely enough room just to snap my snap ring in position if it's laying totally flat on that deck. And as you see, I can't raise it all the way up to get it totally flat with the smallest available shim in the kit. If I use the clutch retaining tool exactly like it's used in the picture without the little clamp and support bracket that Volkswagen has in one of their kits that raises this up a lot higher, I have it positioned like it is in the picture. Now in the picture, you can kind of see where it's kind of raised up a little bit off the corner right there, off the edge, and look like it would be resting against one of the tabs also in the picture. And I have it the same way, resting against one of the tabs and a little bit elevated off of the deck itself, that base ring or the base circle going around the inner bell housing. Now that gives me enough play to actually rotate my spacer and my snap ring without locking up tight in position. I disassembled the clutch assembly for inspection. If the clutch tool shifts out of position and the clutch pack drops down onto the input shaft, they said there's a possibility that this plastic shim, this spacer, could become dislodged and unseat itself from these little grooves, this little step right here. So I wanted to make sure everything was back into position. So of course you can spin this around and it'll lock itself into position. As you can see, it's elevated up a little higher, and as I rotate it around, this was a lot easier with 2 hands instead of trying to hold a cell phone and do it. There we go. I feel it's about to lock in place. Well, let me just look at it. Okay, there we go. So wow, it must be cogged a certain way. Yeah, it is. When I rotate it all the way around, it just seated itself right into position. So if I take it out, it won't seat until it fits in its proper groove. Which is good to know. There we go. So that way you can't make a mistake and install it incorrectly. And then this would go in back into this position. I marked everything just to make sure all my plates and everything lines back up. And I will go ahead and seat this into position carefully. And then that dropped right into position. That turned out good. I did it with one hand without knocking the clutch out of position. And then it's very important to make sure that this bearing right here stays in place, because when I pulled it apart, it's stuck into the top part of here, and as you can see, it'll stick in there, but with a little oil and lubrication, it'll stick to that, and it can become misaligned on this shaft, because you can see the plate right here. So it's extremely important that this sits down into position 2 and sits flush. So I fabricated a bracket to hold my clutch tool in position, or the clutch retaining tool, for 7-speed DSG dog box DQ500. Measuring the input shaft axle play. Okay, it was a pretty good lift the first time. Let me see if I can get another bite and try it again. I'm trying to lift straight up, and you want your lifting points diagonal. Okay, let's see what that is. Taking the second measurement to determine the clutch shim thickness. And we want to be in between 0.05 to 0.12. Okay, I can say this transmission is 95% complete. Okay, and it was a lot of back and forth measuring just to make sure I had everything set up properly. I didn't want to take any shortcuts or half step. I wanted these clutches, the shims, everything accurate and within specification. So I had to actually fabricate a few tools on the way. I had to fabricate these hook arms to actually hook in position and raise the clutch basket in and out of the transmission case, as well as this bracket right here to keep my clutch retaining tool in position, and that was pretty much the lifesaver right here. By this tool keeping this fixed in position, that allowed me to get accurate measurements when I had my micrometer and everything set up, my dial indicator and everything set up for measuring my proper shim. So now I'm coming down the final stretch. I can push this back in the corner, and I am waiting on a tool so that I can install this cover plate and just pop in the snap ring. We got a new cover plate, new snap ring that goes into position. A lot of things worked out great with this. I do not want to take a chance. They even recommended, everything I looked at pretty much recommended using this tool so you don't damage this seal right here. We don't want any leaks. We want this bad boy, this gasket, to seal perfectly on here. So we're going to make sure all of this is properly cleaned up and everything. And one of the other great things that we have that worked out good is we have the pilot bearing. So I have the pilot bearing that would go over here, and that pilot bearing fits perfectly into our crankshaft. So I'm going to clean this up and press this into position, so that way our clutch disc and everything, our hubs, will be centered perfectly. If you do not have this, it will wobble inside here, and under torque and back and forth you'll get some play, and a lot of people may not know and may have their transmissions put together without this piece in here. And I've seen a lot of videos where guys are doing conversions and retrofitting a VR6 engine to the DQ500, but I have not heard anyone yet talk about making sure you have your pilot bearing in the position. So once I get that tool in to put on this cover plate, this will be complete. I'll go ahead and just finish everything off by putting my new filter in and my seals, my actual shaft seals, and we'll be good to go. Something that pushed me deeper into clutch disassembly territory, which I didn't want to go, but it was a good experience, I'll say. It was frustrating at first, was I did not have this fixed. And a lot of the people that has been assembling and doing the clutches, you'll just see on YouTube videos installing this, and they'll hold it up in position. One of the things, as I stated, it can throw off your measurements when you are trying to find the proper shim thickness, and it allowed this to shift out of position and my clutch pack to drop down a little. When it dropped down a little, it caused this plastic thrust bearing inside to shift out of place, and that was not good because that meant me disassembling the whole thing. Just they say right here, you have to pull all of this apart, take the whole clutch pack apart, put this back into position, and then start back from scratch. So this is even a Datsun Motorsport for assembling a DQ500 clutch pack, their race version of it. And I stumbled across this information online, whereas I was able to put this all back together, following these instructions, and get this back into proper position. One of the things that led me to realize that something was off is because I was wrapping up to complete everything and I couldn't get my cover plate back on. And I'm thinking, like, what's going on? What's happening? My cover plate's not coming in position. Something had to shift out of position. So it set me back like a day where I had to do some research, and I came across this document which really pretty much shed some light on this situation. So this being held in a position, everything went through perfect. Okay, back in action. So I was up doing a little cleaning off the table, getting everything prepped again just for this bad boy over here. And we can start putting this baby back together. So transmission 95% complete. Had the adapter plate for the VR6 block, which turned out good. It's already been machined into place. Had my racing DQ500 clutch assembly, and I'm waiting on the tool so I can install this cover plate. When that comes in, this will be complete. Install my filters. But today, when I get off of work, I'm going to get back to grinding and I can finally start putting this bad boy back together. So I'm happy to say I finally have all my wrist pins. This was the main hold up. We got the revised pistons. That was the hold up before the hold up. And I'm ready.